So here we are going to cover some important question answers for the topic timeline and sources of history. Okay. So the first question is, how do we learn about the past? And the answer is, we learn about the past through different sources like manuscript, that is the old handwritten books on palm leaves or bark, inscriptions, writing carved on stones or metal, archaeological findings, that is the remains of tools, buildings, pottery and bones, coins and monuments. They give information about rulers and cultures, oral tradition, stories and songs passed down over generation. So these are the sources, that is the manuscript, inscription, archaeological finding, coins and monuments, and oral tradition through which we can learn about the past. Okay. Next, who studies the past and how? Historians study written records like manuscript and inscription, and apart from it, archaeologists study remains of the past like tools, pottery, bones, and buildings to learn about how people live. Okay, so historians and archaeologists studies the past. Next question is, why is it important to study history? So studying history helps us to understand how people live in the past. It also helps to learn about our culture and traditions, and it helps us to know how human society has changed over the time. That's why it is important to study history. Okay. Now, the next question, how is time measured in history? In history, time is measured in years, and to count years, historians use before Christ, that is BC. It refers to the years before the birth of Jesus Christ. For example, 500 BC means 500 years before the birth of Christ. Second, AD, Anno Domini, a Latin term meaning in the year of the Lord, that is after the birth of the Christ. Example, AD 2024 means 2024 years after the Christ was born. Third time they use is CE or BCE, that is Common Era and before Common Era. These are modern terms used instead of AD and BC. C is same as AD, that is after the birth of Christ, and BC same as BC, that is before the birth of the Christ. They do not refer to any religion and are widely used today. Since they don't refer to any religion, that's why they are widely used till today, right? Next, what is a timeline? So a timeline is a way of showing important events in order in which they happen over time. It helps us to understand when events took place and how they are related to each other. And what is the purpose of a timeline in history? So timeline shows historical events in chronological order, that is from the earliest to the latest. It also helps in measuring time and comparing events, and it make it easier to remember dates and periods in history. That's why timeline is important, and this is the purpose of a timeline in history. Next question. What are the sources of history? And the answer is, the sources of history are the things that help us to learn about the past, and these are mainly oral sources, literary sources, artistic sources, and the archaeological sources. So give two example of each sources of history. So oral sources, genealogical and folklore are the oral sources. Literary sources, Indian literatures are there. Here we can just get the knowledge about the Vedas and the Itihas that tell us about the history. And foreign account, travelogue and historical chronicles. Artistic sources, paintings and sculptures, and archaeological sources, inscriptions and excavation. So these are the example of each sources of history. Next, who contribute to all these sources of history? So historians, archaeologists, epigraphists, anthropologists, experts in literature and languages, and some more people contributed to all these sources of history. So together they work and they just bring out the history from these sources. Next question is, what is the beginning of human history? So the beginning of human history goes back about 3 lakh years when the earliest people walked the planet. These early humans were hunter and gatherers. They used stone tools to hunt animals and gather fruits, nuts, and roots. They lived in forests near rivers and moved from place to place in search of food. Now, this period is known as the Stone Age and it marks the earliest phase of human history. Next question. What were the first crops grown by early humans? So, the first crops grown by early humans were the cereals and the grains. Here, people began farming in areas where cereals and grains like the wheat and barley grow naturally. And farming marked the beginning of a settled life as people started living in villages and raising animals like sheep and goats. So, these were the first crop grown by the early human. So, here I have given you some 10 important question answers from the topic timeline and the sources. So, see you in the next video.